Hey, how's it going? What is up? Back again to talk about season 2 of Breaking Bad, and really looking forward to it. What is up at Stone Yoda? What is up at Hine? How's it going? So yeah, like I said, it's been 1 week exactly since I talked about episode 2, and at the Pattern Slice 9900. Wait, is this the episode after Tuco dies? Yes, it is, sir. Yes, it is indeed. So yeah, like I said, this is another unbelievable episode here. I feel like I'm kind of getting redundant in my superlatives here, but again, as I was watching it for the 100th time, I was again reminded why I love this show so much and never truly get sick about talking about it. Uh, at the Pattern Slice 900. Season 2 does get boring into Peekaboo and Better Call Saul. Boring is quite the term there at Pattern Slice 9900. I'd have to disagree with your choice of adjective there. Uh, Plot development esque, all hyphenated, if you want to go that way. But I don't know if boring is the right word. Definitely a lot of plot development, a lot of character development, especially in respect to Peekaboo. I know that was definitely quite the episode with just Spooge and Jesse in, Spooge and his lady's house, that entire plot, not to mention the B story with Walt and Gretchen. So a lot of character development there for sure. And I don't know if I would call it boring at the Pattern Slice 9900, but I probably wouldn't say it's my favorite episode either. But with so many just unbelievable episodes over the course of season 2 of Breaking Bad, it's hard to compete. And you're going to have some character development and plot development episodes, but that is a little bit further down the line. And right now, I'm just very much looking forward to talking about this unbelievable episode. What is up at Justin Cruz, Pattern Size 9900. Better Call Saul is the best episode of season 2. Yeah, that's definitely that's up there, man. It's a absolutely debatable conversation which you can have. That is quite the episode for sure. I mean, Mandela with the introduction of Gus Fring. I mean, there's so many good episodes in this season to crown one episode the best. That's a whole nother discussion. That's a whole nother kind of worms there. But I see what you're getting at there. At Stone Yoda, season 2 has grown on me so much over the years. It's incredible. Yeah, season 1 and season 2, just such a special place. Right before the sort of unbelievably dark twist at the end of the season 3 finale, which sort of resonated with me so much, akin to the part 1 of season 6 finale of Better Call Saul with the death of Howard Hamlin. Spoiler alert. But yeah, it's a season 2 again. Season 1 and 2, man, definitely a special place in my heart indeed. So yeah, at Hine, I found nothing in Breaking Bad boring. Introspective, yes. I mean, boring. That's quite the word, boring. But yeah, at the Pattern Slice 9900, I meant to say like slow, like the story is slowing down. Nothing that much interesting is happening. Yeah, I mean that's the nature of plot and character development. Not every single sort of story, I guess, is going to be the damsel tied to the proverbial railroad tracks. But again, I see what you mean there. I mean, to tell you the truth, I wouldn't say my favorite scene of in the entire Breaking Bad universe is that sort of lunch meeting that Walt has with Gretchen. I wouldn't say that's my favorite scene by any stretch of the imagination. I don't really find myself rewatching that one over and over and over again like I have watched other scenes. So I definitely see what you're getting at the Pattern Slice 9900. But again, maybe I was just being a little bit too much of a certain type of a grammar politician, if you know what I mean, in respect to that word choice. But yeah, it's all good, man. I just can't wait to talk about this episode. Justin Cruz, what is up? At Trout's Honor, was watching season 6 of Better Call Saul Blu-ray, but I'll take a break. Hey, I mean, I guess you got to see all the deleted scenes there at Trout's Honor. That is that piques my interest for sure. In respect to the other deleted scenes, other than the 2 that I've seen online. So I don't know if you took a look at those deleted scenes on there, but I would imagine there's more than 2. And if you could sort of oblige my interest, I would not be, opposed to that in the slightest. So. Yeah, it's still again. I don't want to get on a sort of like a sort of semantical language scene in respect to season 2 of season 2 of Breaking Bad. But yeah, again, just because you don't like, I don't sort of find that scene very enticing doesn't mean that it's not very. Again, there's so much depth and complexity to that scene there in respect to unpacking the sort of very complicated backstory that Walt has with Gretchen and gray matter, and that's a huge component of the sort of overarching backstory of Walter White in Breaking Bad. So yes, the scene is incredible, I agree, but again, at the same time, I can still say the scene is unbelievable. It adds so much nuance and sort of backstory and plot and character development, but at the same time, it's not, it's not my favorite, if you know what I mean. I feel like it's hard to debate, watching a scene like the robbery scene in Dead Freight as opposed to, that scene. Again, it's a very intense scene, the sort of, even all the various emotions and things of that effect. It's, again, it's its own sort of unique sort of scene. Yes, again, there's tons of adjectives to describe it. But again, I'm really jumping ahead of myself here. We're talking about Peekaboo. That's a few episodes down the line. But anyway, at Trout's honor, haven't got there yet. Better BTS, etc. is real good though. Behind the scenes, I saw there were a lot of features on the Blu-ray DVD, so I am looking forward to seeing that eventually. But yes, without further delay, kind of getting bogged down a little bit in the sort of episode Peekaboo. Great episode in and of itself, and we will get there eventually. But to sort of dive in right here to the cold opening scene of episode 203, Bit by a Dead Bee, we start with this unbelievable POV shot here of Walt and Jesse digging in the dirt. Gotta love a good POV shot. Thumbs up for the POV scenes in Breaking Bad. But yes, we see a great scene here where they're burying Tuco's gun that they took from the crime scene at the end of the previous episode to sort of bury the evidence of their involvement with Tuco Salamanca way out in the New Mexico boonies. Of course, following this and them sort of, dusting over this hole here to sort of make it look inconspicuous, we then see a long assortment montage scene here where Walt and Jesse have to sort of trudge back through the New Mexico wilderness to the main road. And again, if we know anything from Breaking Bad, and I'm not too familiar with the sort of geography of New Mexico, but there's a lot of sort of swaths of land way out in the quote-unquote boonies where there is not much there at all. And it's quite the trek here to back to any sort of semblance of civilization. Great montage scene here of the various different shots, and I don't know about you, but speaking only for myself, I don't know how you cannot get, again, I just contradicted myself there, but for me personally, and I would imagine other people as well, I got some serious Better Call Saul episode 508 Bagman vibes here with Walt and Jesse wandering out in the New Mexico wilderness, much like Mike and Jimmy did in Bagman. Of course, the circumstances were much less harrowing. I mean, it's pretty hard to compete when you have a sort of a Colombian gang member assassin sort of chasing you down and you have to sleep out under the stars overnight. Of course, this trek was not nearly as treacherous, but still got major vibes back to that episode completely. Just unbelievable cinematography here in this scene. I just love the sort of various shots. I mean, this shot right here, I may have listened to the sort of Insider podcast for this episode, but it's been quite a while since I've listened to it, and I do wonder if they sort of talked about the sort of various ways by which they got these unbelievable shots here. I mean, just beautiful. Just the scene here of Walt sort of keeling over, well, I don't know if keeling over, but bending over, just sort of being overtaken by dehydration and exhaustion, very likely, making a lot of sense that he's a couple of lengths behind Jesse. We have to remember this is a man with a stage 3A cancer diagnosis, who is currently undergoing chemotherapy and, of course, is very dehydrated and exhausted. I couldn't imagine making this trek myself being a healthy young man, let alone someone in Walter White's circumstance. So great scene here, of course. Unbelievable various shots, as I discussed. And, of course, eventually they flag down this pickup truck here. And Walt, of course, saying, please, please stop. They eventually do. Prior to Walt getting in the truck, Jesse, of course, says, it's a bold plan, Mr. White. Are you sure this is the way to go? Walt, of course, says yes, and then proceeds to load up into the pickup truck and, drive off into the sort of on down the road. And, of course, when I watched this scene for the very first time, it did make a lot of sense that Walt and Jesse would have to come up with some sort of alibi to justify all of the sort of odd assortment of circumstances which they find themselves in, including Jesse's car being at the crime scene, Walter White's disappearance for a couple of days, sort of justifying this alibi completely. Jesse sort of saying it's a bold plan. Are you sure this is the way to go? Definitely, I remember the very first time I was sort of scratching my head wondering where in the world is this plan going to go. And of course, this then cuts to later that night with following Walt likely going back to Albuquerque. We see this shot here of him in the supermarket. And yes, basically, to jump ahead of ourselves here, we see Walter White completely nude in this supermarket, and of course, as we learn down the road in this episode, this is of course in order to justify his disappearance and to explain his alibi for his odd behavior, sort of concocting this plan of having this fugue state, this sort of momentary sort of lapse in memory. I'm not 100% sure on the exact sort of definition of a fugue state, but sort of a sort of amnesia state is sort of what Walt will explain his disappearance here to Skyler and his doctor and etc. Of course, gotta skip over the scene there of Walter White in the supermarket. We've all seen it, but yeah, quite the setup scene here for sure. With Walt setting the wheels in motion in order to justify his alibi here in this very great cold opening scene. At Justin Cruz, LOL, Anton can't believe Walt gets naked in this. Yeah, that's, it was, definitely, you know, I guess it was written into the script, to say the least, at Justin Cruz. At Hine Mel MC, I'm relatively new to Anton, man. I wish I knew him years ago. Meanwhile, thanks he is doing this. Oh, again, appreciate it. People who've been here for a while, people who are just figuring out about the channel. Again, anyone watching right now, I definitely appreciate the engagement, and thank you so much for the kind words. That Charlie Hennings was interesting seeing Jesse's first interaction with Hank. Since the first interrogation, Jesse was not one up on Hank, help from Walt or not. Yeah, again, this is the very first meeting ever between Walt and Jesse and Hank, so it's going to be pretty you know, sort of great to sort of talk about that sort of story being set in motion. Love what you're doing with the Better Call Saul deleted scenes. Yeah, at Stu Lerner, I'd love to see more of them. That's for sure. I've only seen the 2, so again, I'm hoping to see the rest of them at some point in time, and maybe even discuss them if there's something to be said. But Trout's honor, is Hank the one bit by a dead bee? Tuco. That was my take on it. Or Walt. I sort of saw it, that's actually a great question. I sort of saw it as Walt and Jesse, if you will, sort of them sort of dealing with the ramifications of being bit by, you know, this deadbeat Tuco Salamanca, figuratively speaking, where they now have to deal with the fallout of sort of the consequences and ramifications of everything that they undertook. That's sort of the way I understood it, because I definitely saw Walt and Jesse here in more of a predicament in this episode, and this is sort of what the sort of allegorical reference to that title sort of means to me. While eventually Hank will go through that post-traumatic stress disorder later down the line in the next few episodes, in this episode he holds pretty stoic and steadfast in his emotions. So while he'll eventually sort of be dealing with the sort of fallout of that bee sting, if you will, right now I kind of view it as more of Walt and Jesse dealing with the aftermath of it, just in my humble opinion. At Stone Dioto, that is funny, man. But anyway, sort of getting into it here, the very first shot, we see this great sort of image here. I think it's the very first time that we see this image. Right on at Trout's honor. How's it going, Kane Valentine? As well. Very first time we see this sort of very iconic Breaking Bad image, which of course will be displayed to us in various scenes over the course of Breaking Bad. Very notably, which comes to mind, is in the motel room where Walt is going over the hits on the witnesses in prison with Jack Welker and his crew, and of course this painting is on the wall, and while Jack is discussing this sort of unbelievably complex nature of this hit in prison, Walt is sort of in his own mind sort of thinking about this painting. Don't want to jump too far ahead of myself here in respect to Walter White's thoughts in that scene, but pretty interesting. I was doing a little bit of research here, and apparently this painting was commissioned specifically for Breaking Bad, done in the style of the American landscape artist Winslow Homer. And yeah, so pretty interesting. Of course, you know, extremely intentionally allegorical in respect to, you know, the man, the sailor, and the rowboat leaving his family ashore, and all of the sort of artistic, literary sort of symbolism which really parallels the story of Walter White that we will see over the course of the season. And of course, while I feel like in the moment during the very first watch of this episode, you can sort of piece together the symbolism of the sort of man leaving his family and how Walter White is sort of going through the same sort of set of circumstances here, figuratively speaking. Of course, as Breaking Bad progresses as a story through 5 entire seasons, this sort of allegorical painting just becomes more and more sort of, what's the word I'm looking for here? The sort of, the allegory itself becomes more and more illuminated, if you will, and more obvious, I feel. But that's sort of getting ahead of ourselves here. Of course, following this, we then see the doctor, the sort of ER doctor talking with Skyler and Walter Jr. about Walt and his state. Of course, they are initially very relieved to see their missing father and husband in this scene, of course, and while their emotions will sort of permeate differently in the episodes to come. And again, I don't want to sort of get too far ahead of myself here, but in the moment here, they are very relieved to see that their sort of, Walt is still alive. They were fearing the worst in the previous episode. Of course, them asking about how he's feeling, saying he's feeling good, talking about how he doesn't really remember what happened here in this scene. Of course, this is also sort of foreshadowing where this scene will go, as well as Walter Jr. initially telling Walt about the shootout that Hank was in. Of course, Walter White being this sort of, Superman level-esque liar here, sort of feigning this surprise by the fact that his brother-in-law was in the shootout, when in reality he was there at the scene and a eyewitness to it. Walter White's lying will be readily sort of on full display here in this episode. And initially, while Walt feigns this sort of worry and sort of inquisitiveness in respect to what happened surrounding the shootout, Skyler, of course, tells him that everything's fine. Don't worry about it. You just worry on sort of resting up and getting better. Of course, then following this, we see the juxtaposition of the two families here, with Skyler then calling Marie to discuss what happened with Walt. And of course, the grand irony in all of this is that Marie is also dealing with a very sort of big monumental event as well, with her husband, who was just involved in the shootout. And of course, that's why they both have to tend to their own separate sort of engagements here. And pretty funny dialogue in respect to Marie sort of being taken aback by Walter being found nude in a supermarket, sort of implying that I hope it wasn't a supermarket that I ever frequent in my life, sort of in this scene. I think she said, please tell me it wasn't Whole Foods, kind of implying that she shops there. Of course, at the same time, they're basically saying, just deal with what you're dealing with, come over when you can, because they're both very immersed in these two sort of, I feel like cataclysmic is too strong of a word, but sort of two very monumental situations here. And of course, Skyler then telling Marie that everything's fine with Walt, sort of asking how Hanks is doing after this extremely sort of, you'd imagine, emotionally traumatic event where he had to sort of be in this firefight and take out this high-level drug lord. Marie, of course, saying, Hank, indestructible. And of course, then panning over to this discussion that Hank has with ASAC Merkert and SAC, Remy, as Special Agent in Command. I'm not sure if it's SAC or SAC. Not 100%. If SAC sounds like is quite the abbreviation there. But yeah, before I get into sort of this scene here, again, I talked a little bit about it a little bit earlier, that while Hank remains pretty steadfast and stoic here in this episode, and he comes across as someone who's very sort of able to contain his emotions and almost sort of being a real sort of rugged machismo tough guy who wasn't really affected by this shootout, almost akin to a character like Lalo Salamanca, who is sort of, completely unfazed by the grand level of violence that he finds himself in, at least on a day-to-day emotional level. While that's the initial sort of premise of Hank Schrader's character in this episode right here, it was quite the plot twist, in my humble opinion, the very first time I ever saw it. When we see all of the post-traumatic stress and all of the emotional distress that Hank experiences following this situation here, kind of really displaying to us that he is not a robot and is a human being with emotions, just like everyone else, and is not a sociopath and a psychopath or psychopath like Lalo Salamanca. Ooh, but yeah, getting into it here. Of course, in this conversation, we then sort of, again, not wanting to sort of get bogged down by every sort of little piece of detail here, but basically explaining to these characters what the audience has already saw with everything with Tuco and the shootout and Jesse. Of course, pretty great scene here in respect to Hank sort of explaining how he ended up in a shootout with Tuco Salamanca with no backup. Sort of the mistaken, I wouldn't say mistaken identity, but the sort of grand misunderstanding with his sick brother-in-law, sort of explaining this to his two bosses here. Of course, them also, him talking about he was tracking down his brother through Jesse Pinkman, a former student of his, and sort of them inquiring why was Jesse's car at the crime scene. Kind of saying we're working on that. Merkert sort of saying, have you tracked down Pinkman, sort of continuing to work on this sort of development of trying to figure out what happened here when Tuco was killed. And yeah, quite the setup scene here for sure here in this episode, which will eventually foreshadow Jesse Pinkman getting, I guess, raided by the DEA, if you will, at the Crystal Palace later in this episode. So yeah, don't really want to get bogged down in every little detail in here in the scene because, like I said, it's just explaining to these characters what the audience already knows, so I don't know if it bears too much repeating, but yeah, sort of a great insight into Hank Schrader and his character for sure. And I really enjoyed this scene and all the sort of back and forth, sort of subtle nuances of the DEA sort of going over the case material here with this fallout of the death of Tuco Salamanca. But yeah, it's a wonderful scene that sets up and foreshadows where this episode will continue following this. What is up at Just Dan? Yep, for sure. At Justin Cruz, both sisters were going through stuff, and we have to remember that Skylar was like 8 months pregnant when all this was happening as well. So pretty damn rough for her for sure. Of course, following this great scene here where we see Badger and Jesse, of course, in Badger's car because Jesse's car is totally busto, totally totaled, following it getting shot up when Hank, with that shootout scene with Hank and Tuco. Of course, Badger inquiring, why don't they just bust down your door? Jesse saying they need probable cause before they can just bust down doors and arrest him. Of course, following the police then realizing that Jesse's not home, or them seeing no sort of probable cause in plain sight or no open doors which they can sort of go into, the police leave. And of course, following this, as per part of the plan that Walt and Jesse concocted in the very beginning cold opening scene of this episode, we then see Badger and Jesse proceed to clean up the basement and sort of get rid of all the evidence here of their meth cook setup, which we remember they cooked the blue meth P2P style in Jesse's basement at the end of the season 1 finale in the episode entitled No Rough Stuff Type Deal, because the RV wouldn't start. And before I get into the scene right here, I mean, my initial thinking in this scene is, my goodness gracious, Badger is one hell of a friend. This is a guy you absolutely want in your corner right here, because after Jesse did him so dirty in the previous season, just leaving him out in the middle of the sort of New Mexico desert, stranded completely all alone, totally destroying, what was it, 3 entire pounds of pseudo that Badger had to pay for, by earning money by doing that sign spinning job, which he absolutely hated and totally just left him for dead. That, my goodness, for Badger just to bury the hatchet and basically say, I know we're boys still. My goodness, Badger is one hell of a friend here. And, I mean, it goes even a layer deeper. I mean, Jesse looks like a real sort of, I feel like maybe petulant child is like a little bit too strong, but, they cooked all that meth, and yes, when it was not the sort of glass grade 99% pure standard that he cooked with Walter White, but of course, his own pride and ego thinking that he could replicate that meth just after one cook was really sort of, putting Jesse Pinkman's ego on full display back in season 1 of Breaking Bad. And for him to sort of totally waste that meth that, Badger could have absolutely smoked or sold, it was, yes, while it was absolutely inferior, this was prior to, Walter White being this top level meth distributor who put out this 99% pure meth, or when he eventually teams up with Gus and puts out the blue stuff. So, people absolutely would have bought and sold that meth, and Badger would have smoked it. And for him to just basically destroy it because, it didn't meet his standards and sort of, all this sort of loftiness and his sort of aggrandizement and his own ego preventing him from making this substandard methamphetamine, which he basically used Badger's pseudo to sort of practice cooking, where he basically had to eat 3 entire pounds of pseudo, where not only would that cost a damn a lot of money, it would also, to actually acquire all that pseudo via Smurfs, smurfing cold pills a couple boxes at a time would just, take forever. So, yeah, pretty crazy there for sure. Yeah, kind of dumb of Jesse. Again, it was just sort of ego getting in the way. But yeah, great scene here. Badger is he's a real dog, and by dog I mean I know dog can have a positive or negative connotation, but my goodness is he loyal after what Jesse did to him. And this scene here, my God, this scene of him basically effing the methylamine barrel after he learns that this can be used in order to no longer need pseudo, and well, upon hearing this, he's sort of feigning sexual attraction to it. Pretty great scene here for sure. And of course, Jesse sort of saying we need to break down all this stuff. You saw the cops. Badger basically saying, I can't let you break all this down. It'll be sacrilege. Can we cook one batch for the road? Jesse being in tunnel vision here, realizing that he's absolutely in the shit right now, basically, tells Badger, don't mess with me, despite Badger saying, everything I just talked about, where, we're still boys and all, but you owe me, man. You screwed me so hard. And of course, despite hearing this, Jesse basically says, don't mess with me, man. Don't mess with me, man. Not really having any of it. And even despite all of this, Badger, stays loyal and, doesn't sort of walk out here on Jesse. And it sort of made me sort of think about the whole dynamic between these two sort of characters, where it doesn't really seem like a sort of equal relationship in many respects. Jesse sort of seems to be more of the sort of, power player here. And he even sort of seems to be like the sort of, big boss in respect to his sort of crew with a combo and a Skinny Pete and Badger. So I don't know. It's not truly a completely egalitarian sort of crew here, if you will. But, yeah, despite all this, Badger's like, all right, yeah, I guess, they're family, I suppose. Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Matt D. And families can definitely be demonstrative, and they can, definitely, speak, in a certain way that you don't speak with, strangers or people who are just, who are not your family. So, yeah, great points there for sure. Yeah, Justin Cruz. Badger is a stand-up guy. Just like he says that, basically, yeah, it's kind of ironic because he basically calls Jesse a stand-up dude following this. But of course, this scene here, we get the introduction to Clovis, Badger's cousin. And yeah, I really enjoyed this character, to tell you the truth. I kind of like the sort of literary device by which it was brought in. Badger's cousin being this sort of guy who owns a sort of junkyard, if you will. I don't know if junkyard is the right word, but he's sort of a repairman. He's sort of a, he's a mechanic who also has a tow truck, and it's sort of a great sort of vessel by which to bring a new character into this show. And I really enjoyed Clovis, and it was too bad we really didn't get to see him after season 3 in the episode entitled Sunset. We're following basically following them destroying the RV and sort of them using Clovis by which to introduce Walt to a Joe in his junkyard. Once the RV was basically broken down and there was no real need for storage, Clovis was kind of no longer in the picture in Breaking Bad. And it's a shame. Again, it's hard to explain, but I just enjoy the character. I really do. I enjoy Badger's cousin here. I thought he was a really great role. I really enjoyed the sort of back and forth dynamic between him and Jesse that we'd see over the course of this episode and beyond, the next few episodes. But yeah, it was a great kind of scene here where Badger gets his cousin to tow the RV back to his garage. Of course, charging him an exorbitant amount of money, way more than it would cost, $1,000 for, a couple mile tow probably. And of course, him saying it's the cargo, not the miles. And basically sort of setting it up here where Jesse only has $500, even though Clovis wants the full 1,000. Of course, Badger's standing up for Jesse, saying he'll pay the rest later. He's a stand-up dude. Of course, Jesse's, Clovis basically saying to Jesse, your word is your bond, and Jesse saying yes. And of course, while, this sort of, the sort of dialogue here in the scene doesn't impact the episode too much here, it absolutely will foreshadow where the story will go between these two characters, as I talked about just, during the scene at Full A1. Twat Hammer crew sticks together. Absolutely. Absolutely, man, for sure. Great pull there. Great pull there. And we'll definitely, I guess, Twat Hammer's mentioned for the first time in the next episode when Jesse moves into his friend's house, even just momentarily. And that is quite the band name right there, Twat Hammer. With the Germanic, what is it? Am I butchering this term? Is it called an umlaut or something over the letters? Yeah, that is one hell of a name. But of course, following this and him, again, all the various sort of dominoes in the plan are falling into success. And of course, following this, then Jesse basically, inquires of Badger, what are you going to do next? And Badger basically explaining what we're going to see later down the line in respect to calling on a payphone, and Badger saying, why are you doing this? Why are you giving yourself up to the DEA? Of course, Jesse saying they need probable cause, I'm going to give it to them. And of course, the reason why Jesse had to do this is because he has to establish a functional and sort of legal alibi in the eyes of the law of how in the world his car ended up at the crime scene of Tuco Salamanca's death, and he did not know about it. And of course, everything that will transpire over the course of this episode will justify Jesse Pinkman's alibi of basically being shacked up using methamphetamine and sort of bumping uglies with Wendy for 3 straight days, basically being his alibi. And of course, he has to justify said alibi, and that's why he wants the sort of DEA to rule him out completely, and he cannot just go about living his normal life. And it would make no sense whatsoever if he was continuing to live his life and for weeks or something to that effect didn't realize his car was gone. Wouldn't make any sense. So he's trying to justify his alibi here. And again, all part of the plan which he and Walt concocted at the very beginning of this episode. Of course, following this, we then see the progress of Walter White's stage in this plan. And again, without sort of wanting to get bogged down in all the details here, long story long, following them running an assortment of tests, they rule out the sort of the cancer metastasizing in his brain, which would, basically be a death sentence in the near-term future if his 3A lung cancer already isn't, but sort of explaining the irrational behavior, sort of, causing his brain to decompose or, causing him to sort of act irrationally. And again, following all these tests, the doctors are kind of Walter White's oncology doctor, Dr. Del Cavoli, as well as the sort of emergency room doctor, is basically saying that everything is, is normal given the circumstances of your 3A cancer diagnosis. We don't really understand what happened here in respect to your mental dissociation. Walt trying to justify his alibi, saying maybe it was the sort of medications interacting, and despite Walt trying to sort of justify his alibi here as quickly as possible and get the hell out of this hospital, the doctors are initially sort of dismissive to that, and of course, Walt then learns that following all the physical examinations, they will now sort of have to undertake medical examinations. Walt being very sort of taken aback by this, not wanting to undergo this long process, and as we will understand down the road, all of these medical tests, not having your insurance covered is just going to cost an astronomical amount of money, as we will see down the line over the course of this episode. Not to jump too far ahead of myself here, but, basically kind of Dr. Del Cavoli stating that, until we can definitively rule out, that this fugue state was not caused by something that could recur, we can't rule it out, and you have to stay here in the hospital. Of course, this being the sort of first wrinkle in Walter White's plan, where he probably thought he'd be able to get out of the hospital very quickly or explain away his absence and have him be discharged relatively soon. But of course, we'll learn over the course of this episode that Walt's going to be in for a little bit longer than he wants to, and sort of has to, audible the plan a little bit and sort of wing it. In respect to the sort of therapy session that he'll have later in this episode. But yeah, another great setup scene here for sure. Fallacies indeed. That was quite the DVD extra scene. I don't know if it was a DVD extra or I think it was a webisode at Justin Cruz at Trout's Honor at Full Hay. Yeah, so great reference there. And of course, following this, we then see Jesse's motel room with Wendy getting raided by the DEA. And I always wondered how the sort of DEA got tipped, but I would imagine that probably Badger called in an anonymous tip or something to that effect from a payphone in the middle of nowhere and basically said, I know where Jesse Pinkman is. But that's sort of, semantics. We could argue about that all day long about how the police were actually able to locate him because it wasn't outwardly completely displayed to us here in this episode. Of course, following Jesse knowing that he's about to get raided by the DEA, Wendy sort of, takes her last hits of the meth that they have. Jesse sort of, laying back and preparing to get arrested here. Totally detained and I don't know if arrested, I guess arrested, detained by the DEA. Then, of course, once he's hauled out of the room, great scene here through and through. It's gonna hard to find the exact scene, but my goodness, great scene here. One of my favorites with Jesse and Hank meeting each other for the very first time. And this, of course, will not be the last time these two characters see each other in the slightest. But Jesse Pinkman, I presume. I mean, great line here. Classic Hank Schrader, sort of taking Jesse into custody here following his car being found at a crime scene. So, yeah, quite the end of, I believe that was the end of Act 1, if I'm not mistaken. That's Stone Yoda jumping ahead, but yeah, great scene downtown when he's getting interrogated by the DEA. And of course, again, I keep repeating myself here, but I don't want to get bogged down too much in the little plot details that we've all seen many, many times before. But of course, Hank interrogating Jesse, sort of, explaining why, where he was over the last few days, sort of trying to get Jesse to confess that he was in some way involved with Tuco Salamanca due to the fact that his car was at the crime scene. Of course, Jesse basically sticking to his alibi, stating that I was in the Crystal Palace for, 3 straight days, never left the room, was basically just partying, quote unquote, with Wendy. Of course, again, I'm sort of blanking a little bit on the specific dialogue here in respect to the exact chain of events, but of course, in respect to, yeah, at Stone Yoda in respect to leaving the room. Not like, of course, yeah, I don't want to get bogged down too much here in the details, but of course, the whole sort of back and forth here is just to justify Jesse's car being at the crime scene. And of course, Hank saying, we found your car. Jesse, of course, feigning sort of excitement, of course, completely lying here. And everything that Hank is saying is completely true, but there's no way to prove it. Definitely some serious Charles McGill vibes, if you will, kind of harkening back to chicanery a little bit, where, I am not crazy. I know you were at the crime scene. I know you were involved with Tuco Salamanca. I just can't prove it. So that's kind of the main premise of the scene here. And again, while I don't want to sort of, just repeat the dialogue here that we've all seen, I did actually make an entire video about this once in respect to, sort of, I sort of was kind of thinking like how they weren't able to sort of pinpoint Jesse to that location. I mean, I made that video in respect to we saw Jesse and Tuco wrestling basically with one another following Jesse hitting him in the face with a rock. And I would imagine that Jesse's DNA would somehow be all over Tuco Salamanca, maybe following them, engaging like that. And sort of when they did this sort of autopsy, or they could do sort of some sort of DNA forensic analysis where Jesse Pinkman's DNA is on Tuco Salamanca's body. No jokes, please. So I always wondered about that, like his fingerprints being all over him. And also at the same time, while Jesse sort of says that the bag of money isn't his, the sort of 67,000, we saw him in season 1, or at the very beginning of the season 2 premiere of 737. We saw. The season 2 premiere, we saw him touching that bag, and his fingerprints would have been all over that bag as well. Clearly, I mean, we saw him grab it, so he says, that's not mine, I've never seen that before, sort of, an alibi, maybe that Tuco somehow stole his car, or someone in Tuco's crew stole his car and gave it to Tuco, and that's Tuco's drug money. But I always wondered about this in respect to, Jesse's hands being all over that red bag, which contains the 67K. Not to mention that his fingerprints were all over his, sort of Tuco. But, I'm not sort of a forensics expert, and it is what it is. I'm not going to get, at this point in my Breaking Bad fandom, and I'm sort of, I can't get too caught up on all the little sort of nitpicking plot holes. I still love the show so much, and, it is what it is, to say the least. I suppose that's Stone Yoda. I guess it's possible. I remember there was that one sort of promotional photo which sort of implied that Jesse Pinkman was arrested, but I guess, is he not technically under arrest here? Is he just detained? Are they not allowed to fingerprint you if you're detained? I don't know. Maybe there's sort of, various legal rules. I'd have to sort of consult an actual lawyer in respect to, if they're able to sort of get DNA sample from Jesse Pinkman, or if they're just sort of fishing here. They don't sort of have probable cause to do so. So again, maybe I'm definitely nitpicking here. And, I've heard a lot. There's so many sort of questionable sort of moments here in Breaking Bad. I know a big one is when Mike sort of called in to meet with the DEA in respect to his relationship to Gus Fring. The DEA never brings up the fact that he was involved with that incident with Tuco Salamanca way back in, what was it, like 2003, back in the episode entitled Gloves Off. I know people have brought that up as well, but again, I'm not a forensics expert. I'm not a legal expert, so again, I can't get too worked up in respect to DNA and fingerprints here. So even if you're detained and not charged, they take your fingerprints. It's happened to me. All right, I'll take your word for it, Stone Yoda. But yeah, that's I've always wondered about that scene. But of course, here in this scene, Jesse, without sort of repeating all of this unbelievable dialogue, I love this scene. I've seen this scene so many times. I've rewatched this scene specifically in this episode. Great scene, but of course, Jesse staying with his alibi here, saying, I was in the Crystal Palace partying for 3 days. I don't know who took my car. I don't know what I was doing there. I don't know Tuco Salamanca. This isn't my money. Sort of, again, cost of doing business for sure, where he has to sort of eat the $67,000, and this will be a huge component of Jesse Pinkman's storyline in the next episode. But yeah, cost of doing business here, where Jesse realized that, right now he's sort of treading water here in respect to his alibi. Of course, Hank's sort of saying, I'm going to be talking to that sort of, quote unquote yeast factory of a girlfriend of yours, and I think she's going to roll on you. Very sort of colorful language here by Hank Schrader in this episode. Jesse sort of worried that, maybe Wendy will not sort of stand up against the questioning by the DEA, sort of seeing if her story will contradict Jesse's, and she'll sort of, tell Hank the truth that Jesse and her were not partying for 3 days at the Crystal Palace. Again, you wonder about checking, like, motel records and everything like that. But I guess, Wendy is probably, she probably maybe even has a room there, like on, what's the word I'm looking for? On, like, not lease, but yeah, sort of. Maybe she's like leasing a room there, more or less. Or she has some sort of long-term stays where it's under her name, and she could say that Jesse was there the whole time. So yeah, it sort of makes sense to me in respect to the alibi holding up, relatively speaking. But of course, Hank trying to get Wendy to, tell a different story. But of course, while Wendy is initially sort of, appearing she may crack under the pressure, great scene here when she recognizes him from back in season 1 of Breaking Bad. The episode is escaping me. I think it was In the Bags in the River, if I'm not mistaken, when Hank tries to scare Walt Jr. straight, when Marie thinks that he's using weed, and of course, brings him over to meet Wendy and sort of give him the whole, gateway drug premise on why not to do drugs. So great sort of callback here for sure, where Wendy's like, it's you're the guy who wanted me to do that kid. Of course, whole sort of misunderstanding here in respect to everyone's intentions. A pretty great scene here when Gomi's sort of taken aback by Wendy's accusations here. Pretty funny scene for sure. Hank's, of course, saying to stay on topic. And, of course, despite Hank's pressing to try to have Wendy give up Jesse, Wendy is steadfast in her convictions, saying that, Jesse was there since Saturday. We were shacked up. He never left. And, of course, where's my root beer? I have low blood sugar and I have to use the bathroom. Pretty great callback. I remember even back in, I believe it was Hit and Run, if I'm not mistaken, when Wendy appeared in season 6 of Better Call Saul. She definitely was also buying a root beer there in that scene. So great sort of Easter egg callback that all sort of starts in this scene from season 2 of Breaking Bad. But yeah, just a great scene through and through. And of course, hilarious sort of callback here when Gomez is asking Hank about the sort of everything that transpired with him and Walter Jr., saying that you wanted her to bang a football star, you big bald pervert. Of course, we as the audience know what's going on, but of course, him never telling Hank about that, saying it's a long story. Gomi, of course, saying he wants to eventually hear it, but first we have to kick Hinkman loose, I suppose. But, prior to, Gomez's objections, Hank sort of says, I got one less chance at that quote-unquote skid mark. Of course, then setting up the unbelievable scene that transpires between Hank Schrader, Walt, and Gomez, and of course, Hector Salamanca coming back into the fold. And this will be the last time we see his character, if I'm not mistaken, until season 3 of Breaking Bad. At Joey Boogans, yeah, I mean, they did a really great job in terms of costume and makeup, making her look gnarly. That's quite a word. I would say, very haggard, very used, kind of, a very sort of, a whole sort of definitely sad backstory and all of that for sure. In respect that everything she had to go through, in her life, in respect to, the sort of circumstances that she finds herself in. But whole ate up. That is a term there for sure as well. At Joey. But yeah, I will yeah, that's something to think about for sure. But I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent there, if you know what I mean. At Parb, someone from the public tried to buy her services while she was on set. That's how realistic she looked. LOL. Wow, I haven't heard that story actually at Parb's. I did not know that. That's quite the insight. I never heard that actually. So roached. That is another interesting adjective there. Starting to little bit of a technical difficulty there. No problem. But yeah, interesting assortment of adjectives there. But yes, another again a very intentional sort of flashback, but another intentional sort of shot here of the commission painting in Breaking Bad that I talked about a little bit earlier. And of course, in this scene, we see Walt undergoing the sort of mental health evaluation in order to rule out this fugue state being reoccurring. And of course, so much great dialogue here in this scene. I almost want to try to get away with playing it if I can. But with Walt realizing that this engagement, this therapy that he's undergoing could take theoretically months, based on this psychiatrist. I don't know if it's a psychiatrist or what his official designation is, but when he realizes that unless he sort of gives up the fact that it was an entire lie, this fugue state, he could be here for months. He then, of course, inquires about doctor-patient confidentiality, and when he learns about this, he then, of course, says, there was no fugue state, I made it all up. And of course, Walt, being a sort of very ingenious liar here, is, while he's sort of telling the truth, he's also lying at the same time. It's very much a half-truth here in this great scene, where he basically says that I couldn't stand to spend another second in that house. I just left, and of course not saying the true reasons why he left as a result of him being basically kidnapped at gunpoint by the drug distributor that he's in business with. And yeah, again, great scene here with all of the sort of half truths and lies that Walt is telling here in this scene. It really reminds me to. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's the episode entitled Fly in season 3 of Breaking Bad. If I'm not mistaken, where Walt is sort of talking about, I think it was after he was quasi-drugged by Jesse with the sleeping pills, where he's sort of thinking about, the lies, or maybe it was before, I'm not 100% sure, but, just sort of thinking about all of the lies that he had to tell his family as a part of this process, almost saying to himself, I don't even remember where, the lie, ends and the truth begins, and vice versa. And, this scene here is just a great exemplification of that, where while Walt is, telling elements of the truth here to justify his alibi, a lot of it is a lie as well, in respect to why he left and, about and not telling the whole truth, if you will, where he's only telling aspects of the truth. And again, great scene here about when his doctor basically says, so you ending up naked in a supermarket was a means to justify your absence for several days. And of course he then says why did you run? And I mean, my goodness, this piece of dialogue here in this scene, I think I can get away with playing it maybe for a couple of seconds. Again, I have to sort of cover my huge ugly face with the screen here, I think, because of copyright purposes, but I think I can get away with playing a little bit of the scene. But this is just such a powerful scene where, like I said, despite the fact that Walt is lying here in this scene, there's so much of an underlying of truth here when he's talking about, his, his thought process on how he views his life and everything that has transpired in his life. Yeah, that's Stone Yoda. Walt is playing chess, everyone else is playing checkers. I would have to agree. I would have to agree there for sure. And, there's so much of an element of the truth here. And despite the fact that he's not telling the complete truth, this sort of way that Walt views his life, here that he explained, it kind of completely explains his entire sort of, decision-making process over the course of Breaking Bad. And it really reminds me of his, speech he gave in Felina where, I did it for me, I was alive, I was good at it. And this is sort of explaining why he did it. So let's see if I can, get away with playing this without getting the stream taken down. Let's see. But, why run the, let's see if I can get away with this.
When I can work.
I jumped the gun there.
My 15-year-old son has cerebral palsy. I am an extremely overqualified high school chemistry teacher. When I can work, I make $43,700 per year. I have watched all of my colleagues and friends surpass me in every way imaginable, and within 18 months, I will be dead. And you ask why I ran?
Again, I mean, what a powerful scene there. I mean, my goodness. I mean, it basically just explains the entire sort of story of Walter White here in Breaking Bad, and it's it's quite a powerful piece of dialogue for sure, and it really just exemplifies sort of the everything we know about Breaking Bad, about this sort of man who was just an underachieving sort of man who didn't take any risks and didn't really sort of do anything with his life and was never really in control of his life, and you asked why I ran, and yes, the running is the sort of metaphor for him physically leaving the house, but also sort of why he is doing everything he's doing over the course of Breaking Bad. So just an unbelievably great scene here through and through. But of course, then following this, we then sort of are intertwining here, running between the raindrops to steal Peter Gould's expression. But yeah, unbelievable scene here through and through where the very end of Act 2, it then flashes back to Jesse Pinkman. And of course, we hear that just impeccable ding here from Hector Salamanca's bell. And of course, we see sort of Hank Schrader just, with a shit-eating grin on his face, just grinning ear to ear, sort of, in his head thinking like, I got you, you SOB, Jesse Pinkman. And of course, we then sort of see Jesse peer through the Venetian blinds, and we see him looking at this man he very much recognizes from Tuco Salamanca's, not Tuco, or from Tuco, from the sort of house he was kidnapped in the New Mexico boonies with Tuco, and that sort of that unbelievable look that he gives here of fear when he's looking through the blinds. Again, I'm a little bit past it here, but again, we can definitely see sort of his fear permeating through here with again, probably being an oversight in Walt and Jesse's plan that they sort of overlooked initially, just based on Jesse's sort of the surprise that I read on Jesse's face here in this scene, with him not even considering the fact that this man who they thought was essentially incapacitated and unable to communicate for all intents and purposes could somehow identify him in a sort of legal court of law as being an eyewitness to him being at his son's house the day before. And of course, great scene here through and through with the first sort of scene here of Act 3 with Hector sort of completely mean-mugging Jesse here in this scene. And again, I did sort of think about the fact that in this scene here, we definitely see the sort of anger that's being exhibited towards Jesse Pinkman, and it definitely sort of reminds me of the intense scowls that Hector Salamanca would have over the course of Better Call Saul, especially with his scenes with that involved him and Gus Fring. Of course, not as menacing of a look for sure, where, of course, the whole backstory has not been concocted yet. But again, it's pretty spot on. It's not the sort of same anger he has for Gus Fring is not there, but I definitely sort of, I always sort of call back to that scene from A Rock and Hard Place where he was shooting, Nacho's lifeless corpse in the face with that gun again and again. I mean, I can only imagine what is going through Hector Salamanca's head. And if he had his way, he would again probably be like Hector and skin Jesse Pinkman like a javelina. But yeah, quite again, so much Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad backstory here. With the benefit of hindsight, of course, when this scene is written, this entire backstory has not been concocted yet. We won't see Hector again until way down the line in season 3 of Breaking Bad, the episode entitled Caballo Sin Nombre, when the cousins eventually show up at Casa Tranquila, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's the next time we'll see him, and that just, what a reveal there, getting ahead of myself. My goodness, when, Hector Salamanca's kind of out of sight, out of mind. We don't really know, who these two mystery characters are that were introduced to us in the season 3 premiere, but when they finally go to Casa Tranquila and they spell out Walter White on that Ouija board, and Hector is dinging his bell with the absolute just, what's the word I'm looking for? Ferocity, is that a word? Just being, ferocious with his bell ringing, just the visceral anger he has towards Walter White. That was such a great reveal in season 3. But, yeah, he definitely realized he knew too much more than Jesse realized. That is very true. And of course, I can't do it justice explaining the scene here, but again, Hector's sort of cognitive abilities are established. He can speak English. He can communicate. Of course, we know with the benefit of hindsight, we know that Hector is lucid in his brain. He's only physically incapacitated. And of course, this is now established to all these characters in the room who do not know this outside of this nurse. And again, you just sort of, it's kind of crazy, you think about a character like Hector and all of the backstory that he went through. Ferocity is a word at Virgil. Thank you very much. Was not the best student in high school, so I wasn't 100% sure on all that. But again, it's a great scene here, and I think about all that just unbelievable backstory that transpired with the Hector Salamanca. And I talked about it a little bit in the previous review of the previous episode in respect to how in the world did Hector end up at that house in the middle of the country, about, had he been there, was it just right before he and Tuco was planning on fleeing to Mexico when the shit hit the fan with his organization? Or I also sort of surmised that maybe once Tuco got out of prison, again, exact timeline, very nebulous and not clearly defined in the Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul backstory. But I have always wondered if once, I talked about him in the previous, sort of stream, if Tuco sort of pulled him out of Casa Tranquila following him getting out of prison again. I don't want to repeat myself too much, so if you want to sort of hear me discuss that, definitely go check out that review again. But at Justin Cruz, yeah, that was a great scene. Which planet are we on? That was, this guy doesn't even know what planet he's on. That was a great scene there for sure. And again, when, Gomez initially asked Hector, was this man at your house yesterday? Jesse is just in here, if I can try to find the exact shot here. Jesse just in petrifying fear, knowing that, this man, this man could identify him, wondering is he going to ring this bell? He answered the affirmative yes for all these other questions. But of course, when, Steve Gomez asked him this question, Senor, was this man at your house yesterday? Hector doesn't respond. Hector does not ring his bell. He just mean mug, sort of dead eye, mad dog mean mugs Jesse Pinkman here. And of course, Hank tries to affirm him, saying this guy, he was at your house, inquiring if he is maybe scared of Jesse Pinkman. Of course, Hank being a little bit patronizing towards Hector, basically saying, come on, granddad, don't you want to help us out? And of course, I mean, this scene here, yeah, Justin Cruz, that is really, that's pretty blunt, but it's pretty accurate, where we see Hector then, when inquired about, don't you want to help us out, granddad, he then proceeds to look Hank Schrader dead in the eyes and then proceed to defecate himself. So, yeah, quite the sort of, again, I mean, I could get off on a whole tangent here in respect to sort of Hector's sort of emotional state of mind, but, he's pretty powerless here in this situation in the grand scheme of things. He's wheelchair bound. He cannot communicate. So much of his family is dead. The cartel kind of no longer associates with him. He's basically, Don Eladio doesn't really have him associated with the cartel anymore. He's almost powerless here. The only real sort of objection and protest and FU he can give to this group of people is to sort of defecate himself in front of them. So again, it's quite, that's quite the analysis there, and it's, the sort of Hector's state of mind here. But yeah, that pretty much sums up the scene here. And Jesse sort of, again, an amalgam of emotions likely going through his head of relief and sort of, being grossed out and sort of, almost flabbergasted by everything that just happened here in this scene. But yeah, just a Jesse Pinkman, more or less, as he says to Walter White at that payphone, the plan works and they kind of get away with it all. Yeah, it's Stone Yoda. That was quite the visual effect there, and I almost don't want to repeat that comment that you made. But yeah, that was gross. That was gross, I would have to say. Yeah, at Joey, yeah, great scene here where, Hank basically says to him, I told you, numbnuts, this guy's OG, and, you wanted to bring him in, but basically kind of saying the conversation that likely happened off screen. This guy's OG, old school gangbang. Mexicans don't help the feds. You don't rat you don't rat in the game. That's the one rule. You do not rat. And great piece of dialogue here where I think Gomez says, Duke kept his mouth shut for 17 years in San Quentin. And I think that's a federal prison in California, if I'm not mistaken. And I always wonder that sort of backstory, too, where, the sort of pie in the sky sort of Salamanca spinoff with, relating to Hector Salamanca in any capacity. I always wonder about that, and I always surmise that, just based on what we do know about Hector Salamanca's backstory, it would make a lot of sense that he was likely very young, I would say, maybe even 18, 19, 20 years old when he spent, 17 years in San Quentin prison and maybe got in his 30s and then started, doing everything he did with the cartel, sort of really sort of showing his sort of respect by keeping his mouth shut and doing his 17-year stint. It is quite an interesting. Again, it was a complete piece of throwaway dialogue at the time, and the whole entire backstory of Hector Salamanca and the cartel had not been written yet. But I've always sort of thought about the scene, about the fact that Hector, according to this conversation by the DEA, he was in San Quentin prison for 17 years, and that's definitely not nothing. That's like almost 2 decades of his life in prison. That is something right there for sure. Something I've always thought about there, and of course, Hank basically saying we got to kick Pinkman loose. He's a nobody anyway. Hank basically saying there's no way he's telling the truth here. But of course, Gomez basically saying I believe that, Story more than he had anything to do with shooting Tuco. He's a nobody. He's just some street level guy. He's a nothing. Of course, the grand irony here is he's the sort of key partner with this mystery man Heisenberg, who they are chasing, who they currently have in sort of police custody right now, which of course is the grand irony. But, kind of going back to that chicanery scene, they couldn't make it stick. Despite the fact Hank knows he is involved somehow in all of this, he just can't prove it. Like Chuck is saying, where I know he switched those numbers, I just couldn't prove it. Add Joey, is that a Sopranos reference? I'm not 100% sure. I was actually watching a Goodfellas recently for the 5th time, but again, are those Sopranos names? I don't remember. I'm not too familiar with those names, or maybe those are actual people. I'm not 100% sure. Sopranos. I've never seen The Sopranos. Never. I mean, I've seen Goodfellas, and man, that is an unbelievable movie. That is such a great film, but that is neither here nor there. Great callback at Stone Yoda. Great callback to the season 4 finale. Quite the line. San Quentin is a state prison. Okay, thank you very much, Ed Ben. So 17 years in state prison. Okay, not federal prison. My mistake. 17 years in that's still not nothing. 17 years in state prison is no joke, and that is quite the stint that Hector Salamanca's character did. But appreciate the info, Ed Ben. Appreciate the info. Yeah, Joey, I'll have to get around to it at some point. I've seen bits and pieces of it. I've seen clips online. Of course, I know the infamous ending. It sort of became a, cultural phenomenon. I know how it ends already, but haven't seen it cover to cover. I've seen scenes here and there. Yeah, Joe. Yeah, it was definitely a little bit before my time when it was on TV. I was definitely when it ended. I was way too young to sort of appreciate the nuances of that show. But yeah, at some point, I'm definitely gonna have to watch it. And I mean, I love Goodfellas, and so I don't understand why I wouldn't like Sopranos. I mean, people talk about how they love that show so much, so definitely seems to be worth it. And the clips I have seen is the clips I have seen have been pretty great. Nope, Justin Cruz, never seen Prison Break. Never seen that show. Ooh, but yeah, sort of, Deep stuff as well. Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely check it out. I mean, I know when it was going on. I mean, like The Sopranos was like the show. It kind of was that sort of number one cultural phenomenon show. Like it kind of had that sort of peak zenith like Breaking Bad did, where it came this sort of household name and it permeated even just the television watching sort of culture. I definitely know that that The Sopranos, it was like the show at its peak. Like Breaking Bad was the show. I definitely do know that. So definitely something you got to watch at some point in time. Yeah, the pattern slice 9900. It was definitely. I would imagine it was when he was young, like I talked about. It was definitely when he was on the younger side, like much young. Like I said, I even surmised maybe it was when he's like 20 years old or something. Who knows? Yeah, I'd say so with The Sopranos. I'd say so. But yeah, sort of getting into it here, this final little stretch of this episode. Again, this scene here with Walt basically, Jesse calling his dad asking for a ride. Again, the little bit of dialogue we hear in this scene about his mom going by the house and his dad not wanting to pick him up. Of course, while we don't know exactly what's going on in the moment with the benefit of hindsight, his dad doesn't want to give him a ride because his mom was by the house and saw that, they saw their sort of his quote unquote speed laboratory in the basement and they want no part of this. And of course, that's going to be the premise by which he's kicked out of his aunt's house in the very next episode. But yeah, that's sort of the setup scene here where he needs a ride. Jesse talking with his parents here, don't want to get bogged down in every little detail. Of course, his dad basically saying, can't help you. Jesse's car is totally busto. He's downtown. We know he has the motorcycle, but that is back at his house or his aunt's house. And of course, following this, him using Wendy's phone, basically they decide to go to Waffle House here, and that pretty much, ends this saga here between Jesse and Wendy as part of all of this. And Jesse, Wendy really standing up to Hank and being a key part of this plan. And it's kind of crazy. I mean, even in down the line in season 3 of Breaking Bad, when Jesse initially has the plan in the episode entitled Half Measures to kill the rival dealers, he will reference this scene in respect to Wendy being able to stand up the heat for hours when Walt's DEA brother-in-law gives her the third degree here in this episode. So great sort of little kind of final summation here of this, this aspect of the plot that more or less goes according to plan here for Walt and Jesse. And of course, following all of this, all basically, again, I don't want to repeat myself too much, but all the details that we saw over this course of this episode are that, that Jesse undertook are relayed to Walter White, the RV, the interrogation, everything that went into that. Basically sort of giving a summation to Walter White. Walt then following all this information, basically saying how, Jesse's saying, don't worry about it, the plan worked. But of course, Jesse at the same time saying, yeah, Cue Ball SOB took my whole entire stash. I got like $60 to my name. Absolutely, that's a great piece of foreshadowing for where this episode will go, or where this storyline will go in the next episode. But of course, following Walt getting all this information, he then says to Jesse, can Badger's cousin get the RV running again? Jesse wondering why. And of course, Walt saying, so we can cook. And Jesse, of course, saying, you still want to cook after all of this. And then Walt, of course, saying, what has changed, Jesse, in this assortment of events? Yes, we are through this one sort of, this one sort of aspect of our plan worked and we established this alibi, but what has changed? I still need this money for my family. Nothing has changed. And of course, him hanging up the phone here very dramatically. And, Jesse, of course, getting a sort of shot here as well of him sort of taking in this entire scene. And, yeah, it's, again, one of the reasons why I love season 2 of Breaking Bad is I get to sort of express my displeasure with Jesse Pinkman here over the course of this season, and how, in my opinion, he doesn't come across as the sort of best, if you will. And again, like I talked about, I mean, for as much sort of maybe pity and sympathy and empathy that Jesse wants, I mean, if he wanted to, he could. Again, not right now because he's sort of completely busto. I mean. That's more down the road in respect to, Jesse sort of, able to get out and his relationship with Walter White. That's a sort of discussion down the line. But, Jesse's situation right now, yes, I guess maybe Jesse thought that Walt would sort of want to hang it up and sort of cut his losses here, but as Walt said, nothing has changed. So again, yeah, that whole sort of Jesse thing, I was gonna go off on a whole tangent there, but I'll save that for down the line for sure. Great scene here where, of course, Walt then following him saying, he wants to keep cooking with Jesse, sort of doing the numbers in his head, the 737,000 that he needs, minus cash on hand, based on the amount of drug deals that it would take to get that. And of course, following him saying cash on hand, he then remembers the fact that he left Jesse's gun and about 70,000 in cash in the diaper box in the baby's room. And of course, should his family happen to stumble on this, his entire story will completely unravel and his basically entire sort of second life will be exposed. So, of course, he has to sneak out of the hospital and go back to the house and, clean out the sort of the 60, 70K and put it back in the vent here along with Jesse's gun. Of course, while he's doing this, he's interrupted by sort of Skylar waking up in the middle of the night. I guess it's probably early in the morning here based on the dialogue with Walter Jr. And, of course, Walt saying to, Skylar, you okay? Everything okay with you? Of course, Walt sort of taking this entire scene in as well. And again, I know there's a lot of Skylar hate. She's not my favorite character, but I don't really understand the hate. And at the end of the day, I mean, she is 8 months pregnant, for goodness sakes. I mean, this entire ordeal that she had to go through over the course of this episode, well, she will definitively articulate to Walt over the course of the next few episodes. And, her husband is dying. He's maybe living this double life. He's going to, all the sort of emotions that she's going to sort of, she has been experiencing, calling morgues, calling hospitals, just worried sick about her husband. She's also carrying a child and has to take care of the well-being of the child too. So again, so much going on for Skylar right now. And of course, the grand irony in all this is that Walt is observing this and taking in the sort of, that this is the sort of grand irony of this scene and of this episode where while Walt is trying to provide for his family here in his sort of, very unique, twisted way, at the same time, he's sort of drawing, he's sort of, as the sort of metaphor of the painting is, he's sort of pushing his family away at the same time. That's the grand irony, where he's doing all this for his family, but as he says to Gus Fring in season 3 of Breaking Bad, this will end up costing me my family, paraphrasing, of course. Of course, following this, he then has to go back to the hospital, just on the local city bus, if you will. Great shot here of a callback to the previous episode of the flyers that Walter Jr. was hanging up of, of his father missing. The sort of wanted man poster here. Great sort of scene here with, Walt looking here at this, the poster, great callback to the previous episode. And of course, following this, he then goes back to the hospital here, and of course, has to sort of justify and sort of, again, what's the word I'm looking for here? Just has to make it look as though he never left, putting the sort of IV back in the vein. And again, for all the nitpickers out there, it's actually kind of funny. People who like to nitpick this scene, apparently the angle by which he put in his IV would have punctured straight through the vein or something to that effect. I'm not an expert. I'm not a sort of a registered nurse or anything to that effect. But again, that's neither here nor there. And again, there's a great sort of, I don't know, I'm sure people have seen that sort of meme deleted scene of Walt screaming like a girl. At least that's what it was titled on YouTube. Or was it like screaming like an anime character? That might have been it as well. But a great scene there as well when he puts his IV back in to make it look like he never left the hospital. Yeah, great scene here for sure. No, God, I definitely want to mute that. For anyone who was a stickler here for how to put an IV back in a vein. But yeah, great scene here. I'm sure people have seen it. I mean, just hilarious sort of blooper. Not even deleted scene. It's more of a blooper here. So, yeah. And of course, following this, we then see Walt sort of take that one last look. Actually, if I can sort of find that scene here. But sort of take that one last look at that painting. Again, it's kind of like very figurative, very allegorical on purpose, where at the very beginning, when he first goes to the hospital, we see this painting. When he's going through his therapy session, we get another shot. And at the very end of the stint, we also get one last look at this painting. And again, this painting was specifically commissioned for this show. all of this sort of intentions here by the creators of the sort of allegory of a man sort of leaving his family being a just perfect metaphor for Walter White, like I talked about over the course of this review. And, that pretty much, more or less tying a bow on the finishing touches of Walter White establishing the world's most expensive alibi, as he'll call it later in the season. Of course, following this, we then see Hank taking a look at the Southwestern Aniline tape, and again, not wanting to get bogged down in all the details here, but of course, we as the audience know that the missing link is, of course, Walter White, but Hank can't see it. Again, I talked a little bit about the fact where at the time, Hank wasn't aware of the sort of cartel connection of Tuco Salamanca. I mean, he said that El Paso said he had some kind of cartel connection, and if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if the sort of cartel connection was ever established by Crazy 8. That, Hank would somehow know about this. So, of course, he basically says Crazy 8, 99% pseudo meth, Tuco, 99% pure P2P meth. All of it's connected somehow, only I'm not seeing it. Of course, we as the audience know that it is Walter White. What is up at Sam Fisher? But yeah, not wanting to get bogged down in all the details here. Sort of, I talked about a little bit in the previous episode about how Tuco, I guess, based on Hank Schrader's own dialogue, was not in the, was not on the DEA's radar. But that's sort of, that's sort of, again, that's sort of neither here nor there in respect to all of that, because again, there's no real major gaping plot hole, and of course, the entire backstory had not been established yet. So, again, I feel like I'm maybe reusing this expression, but it is what it is in respect to the holes you could maybe poke in this this cartel backstory that wasn't written in its entirety at the time. At Sam Fisher, I still don't know why they chose this name as a title. I talked about it a little bit at the beginning of this episode, at Sam Fisher, as sort of being an allegory to Walt and Jesse sort of dealing with the fallout of Tuco Salamanca. Tuco Salamanca sort of being the dead bee, and despite Tuco being dead, they sort of have to deal with the sort of fallout of all of this at Sam Fisher. That was sort of my interpretation of this, and it's sort of a figurative, bee sting, if you will, and them sort of dealing with the sort of predicament they find themselves here in this episode, with Walt having to establish this alibi and Jesse having to establish his alibi. That was sort of what I took from it, and some people in the chat did sort of wonder if it was referring to Hank Schrader, but just based on Hank being so steadfast and stoic here in this episode, it doesn't really sort of seem like it was an allegory for that, if you will. But, of course, down the line, we will see Hank dealing with the more post-traumatic stress that he is clearly just, internalizing and burying here deep down in his emotions. But that's sort of, that was my interpretation. I could be wrong, but that's sort of what I sort of took from the title of this episode. Of course, following this, Gomez basically, the premise here, Gomez saying, it's making your head hurt because you're working that ugly melon of yours. Let's, of course, him basically trying to draw him out of the office here under the guise of getting a beer. What is it, like not even 11 in the morning or something to that effect? Basically, anyway, I don't want to get into sort of repeating the dialogue here, but of course, it's all a guise to sort of draw Hank out of his office because they're throwing him a, basically a surprise party, if you will, sort of congratulating him on his good police work here, in respect to La Cerveza. In respect to him, taking out Tuco here in the scene. And of course, in the moment, Hank is, really playing up the sort of machismo and vibrato here in the scene, and, isn't really, really expressing any of the emotions he'll express over the course of this season. He sees this gift that we'll see in the next scene of Tuco's grill in the epoxy, kind of similar to what was the episode in was it? No, it wasn't Axe and Grind. It was Black and Blue when Lalo goes to Germany, and in the cold opening scene, we see the slide ruler in the epoxy, the In Liebe Deinen Jungs, I believe. And so, yeah, kind of makes me sort of think back to that Better Call Saul scene here. But, yeah. Like I said, Hank bearing the emotions for now, which he will express later down the line. And of course, following this, I mean, great scene here with the apple juice. I mean, I don't know. I could go off on a whole tangent about that as well, I feel. But, Walt just basically getting prepared to be discharged here. He finally gets to see Hank, as Hank says, better late than never. He, of course, was all caught up in his own police work and everything that he suffered through over the course of this episode. Of course, Walt feigning. He genuinely is sincere in respect to the fact that, he's sorry that Hank ended up in that situation and it was kind of his fault. Despite the fact that, according to Hank, it was because he was, just because of the cancer, not because he was, in bed with Tuco Salamanca as a business partner, essentially. But, despite Walt's, apologies here, again, Hank, being all stoic and not wanting to be all, lovey-dovey, if you will, kind of saying, don't worry about it, it is, it's a net positive when you think about it. They're treating me like Elliot Ness. They threw me a surprise party. They baked me a cake, kind of saying, you should disappear more often. Sort of, of course, him saying it was just a joke. Again, just more and more just setting up the machismo of Hank Schrader here in this scene. But at Stone Yoda, the way Tuco's grills line up with Walt's teeth, yeah, that definitely seemed to be intentional, for sure. I guess a little bit to the side. But yeah, of course, Hank sort of showing off his sort of trophy here that was given to him of the, the grill of the guy that he shot. Of course, Walt is kind of, in this scene very emotionally taken back. And of course, we as the audience know why Walt feels this way, because he knows Tuco and he remembers seeing those grills and he's almost experiencing a sort of, stress here in this episode. I guess, Hank and Walter Jr. can more or less chalk it up to, Walt just sort of being adverse to this, just by the nature of his personality. So, nothing too out of the ordinary here in respect to Walter White's actions. Very justifiable here, just based on how Walter Jr. and Hank view his character. And, just sort of, putting a sort of finishing touch here on this sort of aspect of Hank Schrader and this aspect of this plot. And again, like I talked about a little bit earlier, it was quite the twist, if you will, with Hank being this character who really experiencing a lot of this PTSD, and he does sort of come across as this sort of indestructible guy, as Marie describes him as earlier in this episode. And very, again, I'm repeating myself here, very steadfast. But the sort of true nature of his character will be revealed, that he's not a robot down the line. Of course, we get to the very final scene here where Walt says it's great to be home. His family sort of the looks he gets from his family, we can kind of see, well, yes, they're happy for him to be home. This was quite the ordeal that he put them through here in this scene. And, even, Skylar, while she's, in the moment, doing, what she has to do here, I guess, I don't know if that's the right word, but almost sort of, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, maybe even still sort of grappling with her emotions here in this scene. At the very end of this episode, we can really see this whole ordeal that he put his family through here in this episode, sort of an allegory that painting was displaying to us. Walt here seeing Skylar being the way she is, trying to make light of this whole scenario, sort of mocking his fugue state, if you will, trying to sort of make light of it, trying to brush this whole situation under the rug here in this scene, trying to be very lighthearted here. Initially, Skylar seems to be, okay with it, and you kind of, in the moment, you wonder what she's gonna sort of, how she's gonna react to this, if I can sort of, kind of quite the scene here. A lot of Bryan Cranston nudity here in this scene, but initially, in the moment, she, is kind of, being lighthearted about his sort of joke here about, how he's going to go out to 7-Eleven, a callback to when he was found naked in the supermarket in the first place, trying to brush this whole situation under the rug. At Sam Fisher, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate the support, man. What do you think was Walt's best outfit? Was me personally, his pink sweater was fire. Are you talking about the entire series? Or are you talking about season 2 specifically at Sam Fisher? Because the entire series, that'd be tough. That definitely would be tough. I've definitely thought about it for sure. His style really progressed over the course of the season. He wore very beige, boring, colorless clothing. He wore a lot of those sweaters. The entire show, that's tough. I have talked about it. It's kind of an interesting pull where every time Walter White wears like a sweater, he's kind of in a compromised state, and he's sort of, isn't in control. It is kind of weird how that's sort of a tell where if Walt's wearing a sweater, he's sort of like not in control, and he's sort of the walls are sort of caving in, and he's sort of powerless in the moment. I definitely have noticed that, kind of akin to why he was wearing that pink sweater. Of course, there's a whole sort of pink symbolism there as well in respect to all of that. But again, that's a discussion for down the line when the season 2 finale rolls around. But his best outfit, I don't know. I mean the pink sweater was just so iconic, and it was so different in it, and it stood out so much more compared to his other outfits in this over the course of Breaking Bad. But yeah, literally, you stole the words out of my mouth at Stone Yoda. I was just about to say that sort of vibrant green shirt that he was wearing in Face Off in the season 4 finale. But at the same time, I mean, it's hard to sort of completely separate the out from the fact that his face was all busted up as well. He had that sort of, from all the, the fight that he had with Jesse Pinkman in season 4. So that was pretty clean for sure. I don't know. I mean, when he wore those sort of dark blue colors, I feel like in season 4 of Breaking Bad, I felt like those were pretty clean. The very dark sort of shirts that he wore, and it is kind of interesting how over time his shirts got, again, he wasn't wearing like Lalo Salamanca and Tuco Salamanca shirts by any stretch of the imagination, but he definitely dressed much more. There was more vibrance to him. Eventually, he interjected the greens and the yellows, those being very intentional colors as well. Yellow sort of symbolizing, false courage and methamphetamine. Green symbolizing greed and money. But yeah, I mean, a lot of those dark blues that he wore, I feel like in season 4 of a Breaking Bad, I enjoyed those. But again, there's so many outfits. There's actually a great meme. Hold on, I may try to pull it up real quick at Sam Fisher. That actually reminds me. I'm gonna pull that up real quick actually before I get to the very end of this episode. Actually, wrong thing there. There's a great meme here. I don't know if you call it a meme, but it's sort of let's see. Yeah, I guess it is a meme. Oh, how about great? This is actually a pretty big image here. Open image in new tab. So yeah, kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but yeah, this meme right here. This is apparently someone. This is quite the. I don't know if can people see this. I might have to move it over here. Hope people can see this and make my head smaller. So yeah, this is a great meme right here. With this is apparently every single thing that Walter White ever wore over the course of Breaking Bad in chronological order, apparently. So this is actually I love this image right here. I think this is a poster or something to that effect. But yeah, like a lot of these sort of darker blues that he wore later down the line. I feel like in season 4, season 5, he was wearing that sort of really dark blue shirt in Dead Freight when they sort of kidnapped Lydia. That was pretty fire, fire as the kids say. But yeah, kind of interesting here. Like I said, a lot of greens and yellows in the first couple seasons, and season 3 was a lot of reds, a lot more red. Again, sort of a symbolism to the more violence I feel that Walter White would undertake in his life. A lot more reds in season 3, and in season again, yes, well, and season 2 as well for sure. These are the season 2 outfits because he wore this in 4 Days Out, the pink sweater here. So yeah, I guess I was actually kind of wrong about that. I guess reds was more season 2. Season 3 was more the blues. Yeah, more when he started cooking the sort of blue meth there, and there was some red as well. This was season 4, if I'm not mistaken. Season 4. So yeah, I mean, there's so much here. I mean, at Sam Fisher, sort of to go to your question. I mean. So, I mean, which one of all these outfits is the best? It would be kind of hard to pick just one. So, yeah, I was mistaken there. These reds were actually from season 2. I was mistaken. I feel like he wore red in season 3 as well, but I guess I was kind of off there. Yeah, I don't think he wore red at all, actually. Yeah, it was a lot of blues. All sort of blue colors here. That's kind of crazy. And, yeah, this is season 4 over here. Yeah, season 4 when he starts with this, oh my God. Who's the name of that musician? Oh my God, it's spacing. He is it Kenny Loggins? Is that the shirt he wore? The Kenny Loggins shirt. So yeah, I guess the Reds was more season 4, not season 3. So yeah, sort of mistaken there. But yeah, a lot of blood there in season 4 as well. So yeah, pretty great meme there. Yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, it's yeah, Joey, it's too many to pick at Sam Fisher. Again, thank you so much for the super chat. It's quite the question there. It definitely makes you think. And to tell you the truth, the outfits and like the way color is used over the course of Breaking Bad is definitely something that's really interested me as I've watched this show, and it's definitely something I've thought about. But to pick just one outfit, that's a tough one there. That's a tough one for sure. So Kenny Rogers, not Kenny Loggins. Was it Kenny Loggins or Kenny Rogers? Again, I'm totally blanking on there. I think it was Kenny Rogers at Stone Diota, right? Kenny Rogers, like Kenny Rogers Roasters from Seinfeld, right? I'll have to. Someone can correct me on that if I'm wrong. Yeah, it was not Kenny Loggins. It was Kenny Rogers. Yeah. I think you're right at Stone Diota. You're definitely right if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, finally getting to this final scene here. Despite everything that happened, Skylar is happy that her husband is home, but of course, at the same time, she's very inquisitive about, this second cell phone that Hank is implying that Walt has, because when they traced that phone call, there was no record of it, implying that Walt has a second cell phone. Of course, there's a whole sort of, what the sort of, what's the word I'm looking for here? The whole implication of a second cell phone. The first thing that came to mind with Skylar was even infidelity and Walt having an affair. And of course, when she asks about this, Walt, of course, feigns that he doesn't know what he's talking about, and how, I don't have a second cell phone. I can assure you of that. Of course, him saying, I don't remember anything that happened. I don't have a second cell phone. Him initially thinking that he can sort of just, bury the hatchet here, despite Skylar telling him everything that transpired that we as the audience saw. Thinking that he can just, brush everything under the rug. Of course, it's the big reveal here is when he finally goes in for that goodnight kiss here, if you will, to Skylar. She wants nothing of it, and this is sort of the out of the fire into the frying pan premise here at the very end of this episode. With while Walt has sort of finished patching over this one problem that he's had in his life, a whole new assortment of problems will now rear its ugly head in the episodes to come, where, Skylar is not an idiot. She knows that something is going on here. She, Walter White's behavior has been too erratic here over the course of Breaking Bad. She knows that he's probably absolutely lying here. There's definitely something that he is not telling her. This is not the full truth. This, fugue state is too, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's just, there's no way that this can explain everything, even over the course of the next few episodes. Skylar's sort of objections and reservations of belief in respect to this even being true are, come to light over the course of these next few episodes. But yeah, that's kind of the premise here at the end of this episode, where, as the sort of painting was alluding to us, despite Walt trying to do all this for his family, this is initially going to start the ball rolling here and going to end up costing him his family. And it's quite, the piece of foreshadowing here at the very beginning of season 2 with, Walt getting the call on his cell phone from Hank, and he picks up the wrong cell phone. It's the burner phone that Jesse gave him from season 1 of Breaking Bad. And of course, that's eventually going to be his undoing, where, not to skip ahead of myself too much here, but eventually down the line when, Walt's about to go in with his cancer surgery, and initially he's patched everything over, and eventually him and Skylar will more or less let bygones be bygones with this whole ordeal over the course of the next few episodes. When he's under the anesthesia and Skylar says, give me your cell phone. Did you bring your cell phone? He says, which one? Of course, then setting the ball rolling to Skylar basically leaving Walt at the end of season 2. But yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. There's so much here that I love talking about it as I did this episode. And yeah, again, season 2, man, it's a great one for sure. And like I said, down the line here, as a lot of people know, I'm not the biggest fan of Jesse Pinkman, and a lot of his actions here over the course of this season, I feel like, do not portray him in the best light at all. And like I said, I guess I'll get to talk more about that for sure at Sam Fisher. Yeah, great next episode for sure. Can't wait to talk about Down. Yeah, just unbelievable sort of continuation here of the story, and the sort of fallout that comes of the world's most expensive alibi, to quote Walter White. But yeah, it was quite the episode here. Yep, at Sam Fisher as well. You know, it's so true what uh Oakley said to Saul in the stairwell. You know, there's proving and then there's knowing, where the court of law is different than the court of public opinion, or the court of the opinion of your family. That's definitely a different thing at Sam Fisher. That is for sure. Yeah, at you, me again. I'm not a Skylar hater. I'm not. For I mean, I feel like I've talked about it. Like, I don't want to sort of repeat myself too much, but yeah, again, she was literally almost 9 months pregnant, for goodness sakes. I mean, you can only just imagine all of the various sort of emotions and hormones that were coursing through her. Not to mention this incredibly stressful ordeal that she was going through here. Over the course of this episode and beyond. So. Quite the yeah, like I said, to each their own, though. To each their own, absolutely. I know a lot of people they love Jesse Pinkman, and so for some people Jesse Pinkman is their be all, their end all, their first, their last, their everything, to quote Barry White. But for me, he just be it as it may, Jesse Pinkman can never find my G spot, if you will, to to be metaphorical. But yeah, he's not doing it for me, man. And I just don't see I cannot put on the rose-colored glasses with Jesse Pinkman. I just can't do it. I just still to this day, I don't understand the extra benefit of the doubt I feel like Jesse Pinkman gets compared to every other character. I just don't understand. But again, that's a discussion for a completely sort of different video down the line, when those sort of plots will come about over the course of season 2 of Breaking Bad. Yeah, it's Sam Fisher. I definitely agree. I tend to have a little bit more sympathy to Nacho compared to Jesse, if we're being honest. But again, like I said, that's a discussion for another time. But yeah, I'd have to say so. I've talked about that in the past for sure. I don't know, Joe Andrew. That first degree premeditated murder, shooting Gail Bedecker in the face. If that's not being a killer, I don't know what is. So I have to disagree with you a little bit on there, Joe Andrew. Another Sopranos quote at Joey. I've seen that one before. Haven't seen that scene, but I've seen that quote. I don't know about that, Joe Andrew. I don't know about that. I beg to disagree with you on that one. Jesse pulled the trigger on that gun. I don't know if that works, man. That's I don't know if that works, holds up in a court of law, man. Like I've talked about, Your Honor, I was worried that my drug dealing boss was gonna kill me and my partner and replace us with someone else, and because my partner was incapacitated, I was forced to shoot Gail Bedecker in the face. I had to do it. So I don't know about that, man. Again, to each their own, absolutely. But that's not how I see that, Joe Andrew. That was Jesse. I mean, he pulled the trigger. He literally pulled the trigger. I don't know how you can say that wasn't Jesse when he literally shot Gail in the face. I mean, just because he felt bad about it, I don't know. I don't know if that sort of is a. I don't know if that sort of holds up in a court of law. Innocent because I feel bad. I don't know if that's how our legal system works. Again, there is a lot of nuance in that scene, though. I do understand. Yes, he felt terrible in the moment, Joe Andrew. I completely agree with that. Jesse, it's not like he was a Lalo Salamanca ruthless killer. I agree with you through and through. But he still did it. And you can say, well, he had no choice, etc., etc. I don't know about all that. I don't know about it. But he saved his and Walt's life by doing that. Yes, but I mean, he killed Gail Bedecker. Again, I don't know how innocent Gail is in all of this, but at the same time, I don't know how innocent Jesse is in all of this. Where, I don't know, just the way they sort of painted his character at the very end of the El Camino movie, where it's kind of like, he paid for his sins, he's sort of absolved, he's sort of innocent. Again, I just don't see it, so. But yeah, he felt bad about it. He definitely felt bad about it. I mean, it basically took him an entire season to get over that. I mean, he absolutely was just emotionally incapacitated. I agree completely at Joe Andrew. He did not want to do it, and he felt really bad about doing it. But he still did it. And I don't know if you can sort of pin that all on Walt. So again, Jesse, again, he, as as Mike Ehrmantraut said, he made his choices, and those choices put him on a road to teaming up with Walter White. And as I was, going to talk about a little bit in this episode, Jesse had so many opportunities to get out prior to him shooting Gale Bedecker in the face. There were so many opportunities, but he never did. He did not have to stay. He willingly chose to stay with Walter White. That's just my opinion, though. So. Again, at you, me, the being the rat part that's not even what I don't, that it's sort of, I'm taken aback by with Jesse Pinkman. It's not the sort of rat aspect of him. It's more just the sort of, the odd emotional empathy that I feel like Jesse Pinkman gets and a lot of other characters do not get. Where, I feel like a lot of people say, well, that, Gale should have known. Gale should have known the risks, and was he unbelievably naive, and should he have known the risks? Yes, absolutely. But I feel like you could say the same thing about Jesse Pinkman. Like, he should have known. He should have known who he was dealing with and how all these things could have happened. All this collateral damage, Brock's mother dying, and, Jane, getting caught up in all this and dying, and Drew Sharp dying. He should have known. It's like, oh, Jesse, he was just, I don't, like, was Jesse naive? Yes, but so was Gale. Again, Maybe I'm speaking incorrectly for people. Maybe people don't actually feel this way, but again, that's just sort of my opinion on all of this. And again, still open-minded for sure in respect to changing my opinion. But yeah, it's at Joey. That's a whole nother thing. That's a discussion for way down the line. But yeah, he did. There's a lot of good points you raised there for sure. Yeah, a lot of great points for sure, man. But with that, I'm. Oh, I was just about to add Sam Fisher. Can't wait to see my roommate's reaction to Howard. I would agree at Sam Fisher. That is an unbelievable scene. Like I talked about in the past, that took me days to sort of come down off of. I was thinking about that scene for days. At Sam Fisher, that one took me days to sort of come down on. That is through and through. And yeah. Gonna happen tomorrow, well, yeah, we'll see, man. I mean, has he been binge watching it or what? But it's, yeah, that one stuck with me. That one stuck with me. To this day, yeah, Howard was really innocent in all this, even more than someone like Gale, where Howard was not in the game. I mean, then again, so was, oh my goodness, his name is escaping me. So was Fred Whalen. Fred Whalen was not in the game. Drew Sharp was not in the game. So many people who were not in the game get caught up in all this. Even the sort of innocent bystander who was gunned down in the parking lot in the episode entitled 1 Minute, he wasn't in the game. But of course, the reason why Howard sort of resonates so much with us, with fans, is because it's like we knew Howard. It was 5 entire seasons of, almost 5.5 entire seasons, 5.5 in almost 6 full seasons of us knowing this character and us knowing the backstory. And he wasn't just sort of a character who we sort of met in a one-off. He wasn't just a, Fred Whalen, Drew Sharp, the guy who was shot in the parking lot. They really were sort of innocent bystanders we did not know. But Howard Hamlin, there was such an emotional buildup of this character, and for him to sort of die that way, yeah, that was brutal. That one was living rent free in my head for days at Sam Fisher. That one took a while for me to come down off of, and I was even completely removed. I was out in the world, in like doing things completely unrelated to Better Call Saul, and it was still on my mind. So yeah, it was quite the scene there. And thank you again so much for the super chat, man. Really appreciate the support. Yeah, Mike suffered too at Joey, but he was in the game. He was in the game. So, and Howard was not. And yeah, definitely, that's going to be quite the reaction. You watching him sort of react to that death is going to be something. And yeah, I mean, I have some thoughts on that. I have some additional thoughts on that as well, but I don't want to sort of go off on a whole tangent here. So, but yes, with that being said, I'm going to have to wrap it up here. Thank you everyone so much for tuning in tonight. Thank you at Sam Fisher for the super chats. Really appreciate the support. Definitely let me know how that goes when you watch your friend watch Howard meet his demise in Plan and Execution. But yes, like I said, I will try to do this again next Tuesday. We'll see. I mean, the holidays are sort of coming up. I know people are doing a lot of things, as am I. So right now the plan is to do this again on Tuesday. Hopefully, we'll see though. Maybe sooner, probably not, but it's definitely possible. At Charlie Hennings, I appreciate that. Yeah, like I said, really appreciate everyone for tuning in tonight. Really enjoy talking about this show. It really never gets old. And like I said, have a great rest of your evening. And I will see you guys around. Take it easy. And yeah, looking forward to the next one.